Imagine, just for a moment, what life was like thousands of years ago. Every slice of bread, every bowl of porridge relied on someone's aching arms grinding grain, hour after hour, day after day. For whole communities, this was a daily routine, the rhythm of ancient life. Now picture a small village near a river, maybe somewhere in the hills of the ancient Near East. The river rushes by, never resting, always moving. One day, someone looks at that flowing water and thinks, what if we could let the river do the hard work? What if water, not people, could turn the heavy stones that grind our grain? And just like that, the world begins to change. This is the quiet birth of the watermill, an idea so simple yet so powerful that it would feed millions and build empires. The watermill is not a machine of war or conquest. It is a tool of life, born from the gentle observation of nature and a desire to ease human labor. The first watermills were quite basic, just wooden wheels dipping into the river, turning slowly with the current. But their impact was instant and profound. With the river's help, people found themselves with more free time, more food, and new opportunities. Families who once spent their days grinding grain could now dream bigger, maybe build, invent, or trade. As this clever invention spread, from the hills of Mesopotamia to the grand cities of Greece and Rome, it transformed not only how people worked, but how they lived. The humble watermill became the silent engine behind some of history's greatest civilizations. There's something magical about these early days of innovation. The watermill did not just save time, it connected people to their rivers and landscapes in a brand new way. Some ancient writers even described towns where the sound of water wheels filled the air, a comforting song of progress and possibility. And here's a little-known fact. In some places, water mills were used not just to grind grain, but to crush ore in mines or press olives for oil. They quietly powered the industries, big and small, that shaped daily life in the ancient world. So, as we begin this journey together, let's step back and imagine standing by the riverside, watching the wheel turn, feeling the hope and wonder of a community that has just discovered the power hidden in flowing water. This is the story of the watermill, and it is only just beginning. If you love these glimpses into history as much as we do, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires. There's so much more to discover about the inventions that changed our world. Picture this. You're standing by a rushing river around 1,000 years before Christ, somewhere in the hills between ancient Mesopotamia and Anatolia. The water crashes over rocks with endless energy, day and night, season after season. For thousands of years, people had watched this same scene and seen nothing more than water flowing downstream. But then, someone had a moment of pure genius. Imagine being that person. Perhaps a tired miller who had spent countless hours grinding grain by hand, watching the river flow past their village every single day. Their arms ached from turning heavy stone grinding wheels. Their back was bent from years of repetitive labor. And suddenly, as they watched that relentless current, a thought struck them like lightning. What if the river could do this work instead? The first watermills were beautifully simple in their design. These ancient engineers, and that's exactly what they were, even without the formal title, figured out how to capture the river's energy using a horizontal wheel placed directly in the flowing water. As the current pushed against wooden paddles attached to this wheel, it would spin continuously. This rotating motion was then transferred upward through a vertical shaft to turn the heavy grinding stones above. It sounds almost too simple to be revolutionary, but think about what this meant for ordinary people. For the first time in human history, they could produce flour and meal without the backbreaking labor that had defined their ancestors' lives for millennia. A single mill could do the work of dozens of people, operating as long as the river flowed. The ingenuity didn't stop with grain, though. Here's something most people don't realize. These early watermills were probably crushing more than just wheat and barley. Archaeological evidence suggests that some of the earliest applications might have been in mining communities, where the same rotating power was used to crush ore and extract precious metals. Imagine ancient miners discovering that this river-powered technology could help them process copper, silver, and gold more efficiently than ever before. The technology spread like wildfire across the ancient world, but not in the way we might expect today. There were no instruction manuals or blueprints being shared between civilizations. Instead, the knowledge traveled through traders, conquered peoples, and migrating craftsmen. Each culture that adopted watermills added their own innovations and improvements. What makes this story even more fascinating is how it reveals something profound about human nature. Here was a technology that could genuinely improve life for everyone, reducing physical suffering and increasing food production. Yet its adoption wasn't immediate or universal. Some communities embraced it quickly, while others stuck to traditional methods for generations. The same pattern we see with new technologies today was playing out thousands of years ago. The mills themselves became gathering points for communities. People would travel from surrounding villages, bringing their grain to be processed. These locations naturally evolved into centers of commerce and social interaction. The miller became an essential figure in society, not just someone who provided a service, but a keeper of technology that entire communities depended upon. As the years passed, these simple mills evolved into more sophisticated machines. Engineers learned to build them with greater efficiency, using the water's power more effectively. They developed better gear systems to transfer the rotational energy and created more durable grinding stones that could handle larger volumes of grain. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about these ancient water mills is how they represent humanity's first real step toward mechanization. For thousands of years, almost all work had required direct human or animal muscle power. The watermill changed that fundamental relationship between humans and energy. It showed that nature's forces could be harnessed and directed to serve human needs. This wasn't just about making bread easier to produce, though that was certainly important for growing populations. It was about a completely new way of thinking about work, efficiency, and the relationship between technology and daily life. The descendants of these mills, thousands of years later, would power the Industrial Revolution and reshape the modern world. Standing by that ancient river today, you might not see anything particularly special about the rushing water. But now you know that someone once looked at that same scene and saw the future. A future where human ingenuity could transform the raw power of nature into something that would feed civilizations and change history forever. Fast forward a few centuries, and something extraordinary was happening across the Mediterranean world. The simple water mills that had started in those ancient Near Eastern hills were about to become the backbone of two of history's greatest civilizations, Greece and Rome. Picture yourself in ancient Greece around the 5th century before Christ. You're walking through the countryside outside Athens, and you hear a rhythmic grinding sound echoing from a valley below. As you approach, you discover something that would have seemed like magic to earlier generations. Multiple water wheels working in perfect harmony, powered by a carefully diverted stream. The Greeks had taken this borrowed technology and made it their own. But here's what's truly fascinating about the Greek approach. They didn't just copy what they had learned. Greek engineers, with their love of mathematics and precision, began to understand the science behind water power. They calculated optimal wheel sizes, experimented with different paddle designs, and figured out how to squeeze every bit of energy from flowing water. They even gave these machines a beautiful name, hydraletēs, which literally means water worker. The Greeks were innovators in ways that might surprise you. While we often think of water mills as being used only for grinding grain, Greek communities were using them to power olive presses, crush minerals for making pottery glazes, and even operate early sawmills for construction projects. Imagine the sound of an ancient Greek town, not just the voices in the agora and the hammering of blacksmiths, but the constant, reassuring rhythm of water wheels turning day and night. Then came the Romans, and they transformed everything. The Romans looked at water mills the way they looked at roads, aqueducts, and armies, as tools for building and maintaining an empire. They didn't just want a few mills here and there. They wanted industrial-scale operations that could feed their growing cities and support their massive military campaigns. The crown jewel of Roman watermill engineering has to be the complex at Barbagal in southern France. Try to imagine this scene. 16 massive water wheels arranged in 2 parallel rows, stepping down a hillside like a giant's staircase. Each wheel was perfectly positioned to catch the water as it flowed from the one above, creating a cascade of mechanical power that operated from dawn to dusk. This wasn't just impressive engineering, it was a glimpse into the future of mass production. The Barbagal complex could process enough grain to feed somewhere between 10,000 and 40,000 people every single day. That's roughly equivalent to feeding an entire Roman legion, with enough left over to supply the surrounding civilian population. But what really shows Roman ingenuity is how they solved the problem of urban milling. Picture ancient Rome, a bustling metropolis with over 1 million inhabitants, but limited space for traditional water mills. The Tiber River ran right through the city, but most of the suitable mill sites were already taken, and real estate was incredibly expensive. Enter one of the most clever inventions you've probably never heard of: floating mills. Pliny the Elder, that tireless Roman chronicler of everything interesting in his world, described these floating mills with obvious admiration. Imagine sturdy boats, built more like barges, anchored in the fastest-flowing parts of rivers. Underneath each boat, water wheels would spin continuously in the current, powering grinding stones mounted on the deck above. These floating mills were genius solutions to urban problems. They could be positioned wherever the river current was strongest, moved when water levels changed with the seasons, and required no valuable land. During times of siege or emergency, they could even be relocated to safer areas upriver or downriver. The Romans built floating mills not just on the Tiber, but on rivers throughout their empire. In Paris, ancient Lutetia, floating mills operated on the Seine for centuries. Along the Rhine frontier, they provided fresh flour for Roman garrisons. These weren't crude contraptions either. Roman engineers designed them with sophisticated gear systems and weatherproof housing for the grinding mechanisms. What strikes me most about this Roman approach is how it reveals their practical mindset. They saw a good idea and immediately asked, how can we make this bigger, more efficient, and more useful for our specific needs? They weren't content with small improvements. They wanted revolutionary applications. The social impact was enormous, too. In earlier times, wealthy Roman families might have owned dozens of slaves whose primary job was grinding grain by hand. With water mills handling this work, those same families could redirect their human resources toward other activities. It was an early example of technology transforming not just production, but entire social structures. Roman mill owners became influential figures in their communities. They controlled an essential service that everyone needed, and they often became quite wealthy. Some mills were owned by the state and operated for public benefit, while others were private enterprises that charged fees for grinding services. The technology kept evolving under Roman hands. They developed more sophisticated gear systems that could transfer power over greater distances, allowing a single water wheel to operate multiple sets of grinding stones. They learned to build mills that could handle different types of grain and even process other materials like bark for tanning leather. By the height of the Roman Empire, water mills had become so essential to daily life that major cities maintained emergency grain reserves specifically to keep their mills operating during droughts or floods. The rhythmic sound of grinding stones had become the heartbeat of Roman civilization. Looking back, it's remarkable how Greeks and Romans transformed a simple innovation into an empire-building technology. They didn't just adopt water mills. They reimagined what was possible and created systems that would influence engineering and urban planning for centuries to come. Are you fascinated by this ancient legacy? Then comment your thoughts, like the video, share it with fellow history lovers, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more epic journeys. Here's something that ancient historians don't always talk about, but it's crucial for understanding how technology really changes societies. Every innovation creates winners and losers, and water mills were no exception. Imagine you're a skilled grain miller in ancient Rome around the 2nd century after Christ. For generations, Your family has made a living using hand-operated grinding stones called querns. Your father taught you the precise techniques, how to adjust the stones for different types of grain, how to achieve the perfect texture for bread flour, how to work efficiently without wearing yourself out. It was hard work, but it was honest work, and it fed your family. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. A wealthy Roman businessman decided to build a watermill just upstream from your village. Suddenly, he could process more grain in a single day than you could manage in a week. His flour was consistent, his prices were lower, and customers who had been coming to your family for decades started taking their business elsewhere. This scenario played out thousands of times across the Roman Empire, and it reveals something profound about technological progress. It's never just about machines, it's about people, power, and the fundamental ways societies organize themselves. The watermills didn't just replace human labor, they concentrated economic power in ways that hadn't existed before. Think about it. To build and operate a watermill, you needed several things that most ordinary people couldn't afford. You needed access to a suitable river location, which often meant owning valuable land or having the political connections to secure water rights. You needed substantial capital to construct the mill, dig channels, and install the grinding mechanisms. Most importantly, you needed the legal authority to divert water flow, which could affect other users downstream. This meant that watermill ownership naturally gravitated toward people who were already wealthy and politically connected: Roman senators, wealthy merchants, and local aristocrats. The technology that was supposed to reduce human suffering ended up creating new forms of economic inequality. But the story gets even more complex when you consider what happened to the people who had been doing this work before. In many parts of the Roman world, grain grinding had been done by slaves, often women who spent their entire days operating hand mills in wealthy households or commercial operations. When watermills took over this work, what happened to these people? Some historians suggest that many were reassigned to other tasks, but others may have simply become economically redundant. For free workers and small-scale millers, the transition was often devastating. These were skilled craftspeople who had built their entire livelihoods around a particular technology. When that technology became obsolete almost overnight, they faced impossible choices. Try to compete against mechanized operations with vastly superior efficiency, find completely different work, or leave their communities altogether to seek opportunities elsewhere. The social disruption went beyond just the people directly involved in milling. Entire economic networks that had grown up around hand-operated mills suddenly found themselves obsolete. The makers of quern stones, the traders who specialized in moving grain to small mills, the local merchants who had built relationships with traditional millers, all of these people saw their businesses threatened by the new technology. But here's where the story takes an interesting turn. The Romans' very success with watermills may have prevented them from developing other innovations that could have been even more revolutionary. Consider this fascinating historical puzzle. Windmills, which would become crucial to medieval European development, were invented much earlier than most people realize. The first windmills appeared in Persia around the 7th century after Christ, and the technology was available to Roman engineers centuries before the empire fell. So why didn't the Romans adopt windmills on a large scale? The answer might be precisely because their watermills worked so well. The Roman Empire was blessed with abundant rivers and sophisticated aqueduct systems that provided reliable water flow year-round. When you have a technology that's already meeting your needs efficiently, there's less incentive to invest in alternatives. This created what we might call a technological lock-in effect. Roman engineers became incredibly sophisticated at designing and building watermills, but they never developed the same expertise with wind power. When other civilizations were experimenting with harnessing wind energy, Roman resources and attention remained focused on perfecting hydraulic systems. From a broader historical perspective, this represents one of those moments when success in one area might have limited innovation in others. The Romans' mastery of water power was so complete that they may have missed opportunities to develop technologies that could have been even more transformative. There's also a geographic element to consider. The Mediterranean climate that supported Roman civilization featured predictable seasonal patterns and generally reliable water sources. Wind patterns, on the other hand, could be much more variable and unpredictable. For an empire that valued stability and consistent production, water mills offered a level of reliability that wind power couldn't match. But imagine for a moment what might have happened if the Romans had seriously pursued wind technology alongside their water mills. They could have built windmills in areas where water was scarce, creating food production capabilities in regions that were otherwise difficult to develop. They might have developed hybrid systems that used both wind and water power, providing backup capabilities when one source was unavailable. The ripple effects of these technological choices extended far beyond individual communities or even the Roman Empire itself. The patterns of development established during the Roman period influenced how European societies approached energy and production for centuries afterward. Areas that had become dependent on water mills often remained so for generations, while regions that never developed sophisticated hydraulic systems had to find other solutions to their energy needs. This is one of those historical examples that reminds us how technological progress is never simple or straightforward. The same innovation that reduced back-breaking labor for some people eliminated livelihoods for others. The same efficiency that helped feed growing cities also concentrated economic power in fewer hands. The same success that made Roman engineering famous throughout the ancient world may have inadvertently limited their development of alternative technologies. Understanding this complexity doesn't diminish the remarkable achievement of ancient water mills. But it does help us appreciate that every technological revolution creates profound changes that go far beyond the immediate mechanical improvements. The echoes of these ancient disruptions can help us think more thoughtfully about how we manage technological change in our own time. As we reach the end of this journey through ancient waters and spinning wheels, I want you to pause for a moment and listen. Right now, wherever you are in the world, there's likely a gentle hum of mechanical power surrounding you. Maybe it's the fan in your computer, the motor in your refrigerator, or the distant sound of traffic outside. These sounds are so common that we barely notice them anymore, but each one carries an echo that reaches back over 3,000 years to those first water mills. It's remarkable when you think about it. Every single piece of rotating machinery in our modern world, from the tiniest electric motor to the massive turbines that generate our electricity, operates on principles that those ancient engineers figured out by watching rivers flow. They discovered something fundamental about how rotational energy could be captured, transferred, and put to work, and that discovery has never stopped evolving. The path from those first wooden wheels in ancient streams to today's sophisticated machinery isn't as distant as you might imagine. Take hydroelectric power plants, for instance. When you flip a light switch in your home, there's a good chance that electricity is coming from water flowing through turbines that are direct descendants of Roman water mills. The scale is vastly different, and the engineering is incredibly more sophisticated. But the core principle remains exactly the same. Moving water turns a wheel, and that rotational energy is converted into useful work. But the influence goes far beyond just water power. Those ancient mill builders were the first people to seriously grapple with problems that still challenge engineers today. How to efficiently transfer mechanical energy from one place to another, how to control the speed of rotating machinery, and how to build systems that can operate reliably for years with minimal maintenance. When medieval European engineers began building windmills, they drew heavily on techniques and principles that had been developed for water mills centuries earlier. The gear systems, the methods for transferring power vertically and horizontally, even the social and economic models for operating mills, all of this knowledge flowed directly from the ancient hydraulic traditions. The Industrial Revolution itself might have unfolded very differently without this foundation. When James Watt was perfecting his steam engine in the 18th century, he wasn't starting from scratch. He was building on centuries of accumulated knowledge about mechanical power systems that traced back to those Roman engineers who had figured out how to synchronize multiple grinding stones and transfer energy over long distances. Think about something even more fundamental: the very concept of automation. Those ancient water mills represented humanity's first real step toward machines that could work independently of direct human control. Once you set up a water mill properly, it would operate continuously as long as the river flowed, requiring only occasional maintenance and oversight. This was a revolutionary idea that would eventually lead to all the automated systems we depend on today. But there's something even more profound here that connects us to those ancient innovators. The way they approached problem solving. They looked at the natural world around them and saw not just resources to be consumed, but energy systems that could be harnessed and directed. They understood that the key to progress wasn't just working harder, but working smarter, by finding ways to make natural forces do the heavy lifting. This mindset, this ability to see potential energy in the world around us and figure out how to capture it, is exactly the same thinking that drives modern renewable energy development. When engineers design solar panels to track the sun's movement across the sky, or when they position wind turbines to capture prevailing breezes, they're using the same fundamental approach that led those ancient observers to position their water wheels in the fastest-flowing parts of rivers. The story becomes even more fascinating when you consider how many other ancient innovations are still shaping our world in ways we rarely notice. The concrete used in Roman construction is still influencing how we build today. The road engineering principles developed by Roman surveyors still guide modern highway construction. The agricultural techniques perfected in ancient Mesopotamia still form the basis of modern farming. Each of these innovations followed a similar pattern to the water mills. They started as solutions to immediate practical problems, but they ended up creating entirely new possibilities that their inventors never could have imagined. The ancient engineer who first figured out how to make a river turn a grinding stone probably thought they were just solving the problem of making flour more efficiently. They couldn't have envisioned that their insight would eventually power factories, generate electricity, and help launch the modern industrial world. This is one of the most beautiful aspects of human innovation. We build on each other's discoveries across centuries and millennia. Every generation inherits the accumulated wisdom of those who came before, adds their own insights and improvements, and passes the enhanced knowledge forward to the next generation. But here's what I find most inspiring about the watermill story. It reminds us that world-changing innovations don't always come from the most obvious places or the most powerful people. That first watermill was probably built by someone whose name we'll never know, in a village that no longer exists, to solve a problem that seemed mundane at the time. Yet their insight rippled forward through history and continues to influence our lives today. This gives me hope for our own time. Somewhere in the world right now, someone is probably working on what seems like a small, practical problem. Maybe finding a better way to purify water, or store energy, or grow food in challenging environments. They might not realize it, but they could be laying the groundwork for innovations that will still be benefiting humanity 1,000 years from now. The ancient water mills teach us that progress isn't just about dramatic breakthroughs or revolutionary moments. It's also about the patient accumulation of practical knowledge, the gradual refinement of useful techniques, and the willingness to see new possibilities in familiar surroundings. Every time you hear the hum of machinery, remember that you're listening to an echo of ancient rivers and the ingenuity of people who lived 3,000 years ago. Their innovations flow through our modern world like an invisible current, powering not just our machines, but our continued belief that human creativity and determination can harness the forces of nature to build a better future. The story of the watermill is ultimately a story about us, about our endless capacity to observe, adapt, and improve. It's a reminder that the future is built on foundations laid by countless previous generations, and that our own innovations will someday seem ancient to people we'll never meet, living in a world we can barely imagine. But that invisible thread of human ingenuity will continue to connect us all, flowing forward like an endless river, carrying the best of what we've learned toward shores we have yet to discover. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more untold stories of the ancient world. Until next time, keep exploring the past to understand the future.